in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus would say, don't try to take a speck out of your brother's eye when you have a log in your eye. That parable would say, make sure that your windows are clean when you look at somebody else's, wash through them. Good word for us. Let's talk about this judging. What is Jesus talking about? How can we put it into practice? First of all, I want to say that when Jesus is referring to judging, he's telling us this is not a time, you don't have permission from God to be what some might call censorious, to be critical. A censorious person is one who finds faults, who's negative, destructive in their words and their attitudes toward others. You know, the kind of person that enjoys finding other people's faults, putting the worst possible construction on someone else's motives, who is ungenerous toward them and their mistakes. That is what Jesus says. Do not judge. Do not have that attitude of critical, ugly, mean-spirited criticism. To presume arrogantly and to anticipate that I can judge is to take over God's place of judgment. God is the one who can judge, not me. And in fact, when I take that place, I try to play God. And I'm a terrible God. That is not my place. It is not our place. You cannot look into someone else's heart and understand their true motives and why they do what they do. So be very, very careful about your attitude as you watch others and as we deal together with what happens next in this pandemic. I've read in the newspaper editorials and I've heard people talk about the selfishness of others who do not adequately quarantine themselves or go out in public without a mask or do something that someone feels like puts someone else in jeopardy. And I want to say, let's stop that kind of censorious criticism. Do you know their heart? Are they really being selfish? Maybe there's something going on there that you don't understand, or maybe you're not as wise as you think you are. Please be careful. This is not a time in our cities, in our state, in our nation, when we can be at each other's throats with criticism. But rather, this is a time when we need to support and care about one another and find ways of helping each other as we deal with the aftermath of this pandemic and what happens next. Please, 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 no censorious spirit. Do not judge. Do not be critical. Do not take criticism as your first step in reacting and interacting with others. You know, if we'll stop doing that, one of the things that will help us is that we be careful not to give in to fear. I think it's Winston Churchill was famous to say in World War II, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. I may be wrong. I didn't look up the origin of that quote, but I think it's right on the money. In this pandemic, what we have to fear is fear itself, and we don't need to give in to fear. Sometimes fear moves us to be critical, to be harsh, to think of others and to be critical of their actions because we are afraid. We do not need to give in to fear. Fear is a terrible motivation for opening up and interacting with others. Let me be quick to add that we do need to realize that our actions have consequences and we need to be careful and thoughtful about them, even unintended consequences. Our actions require humility. We need to be patient with one another. I would say we need to be prayerful. You remember the last few weeks I've been challenging us to ask God for help, to seek Him about what to do next, to knock on heaven's door, and that if we'll ask and seek and knock, that He will help us to handle rebuilding and getting back to life that we should have together. Let's realize that our actions do have consequences. Let's think through them carefully, humbly, prayerfully. As we rebuild, as we seek to put Jesus' words into action, as we do not judge, Jesus would say, check your own life before you criticize or pick at someone else's problems. So let's do that. In the parable we just watched, let's wash our windows. Let's check our own decisions, our own actions, our own motivations. That's not always easy. Sometimes we are better at seeing the problems in other people's lives than we are at seeing them in ours. In fact, I've discovered, and let me challenge you for a moment, that often when I see someone else and I find myself critical of what I see there, an action, an attitude, something there, sometimes it's because I have that same action, that same attitude, that same problem, and I have been unwilling to see it in myself. And I am quick to see it in someone else. If we will just stop, and if we will just ask ourselves, how am I doing? Am I showing the kind of concern I should have for others? Am I helping where I can help? Am I supporting those that I need to support? Or am I critical and condemning? And am I stepping on someone else so that I can feel better about myself? Jesus would say, no. First, take the stick out of your own eye. First, wash your windows. And then you can help someone else. And we can help each other. If our hearts are right, if our lives are tuned in to where they should be, if we're following the kinds of principles, the actions that we are asking others to follow, not judging them, but walking with them, then maybe God can use us to help them too. Maybe we can offer a word of help or encouragement rather than a word of criticism and condemnation. Be careful. Check your own life first. I need to check my own life before I start criticizing an editorial I read in the Fargo Forum or a word that I've heard someone mutter. Look into my heart. What does God see there? And then once that is adjusted, corrected, if I find the ugliness there and I turn to God and I say, God, please forgive me and give me a clean heart, the kind of heart that you want me to have toward others in this time, then God can use me to help others too. It's not that we don't help one another. It's not that we don't need to help each other do better. It's not that we don't need to see our faults and as a community do better there. We do. But first, we need to check ourselves. That's Jesus' words. And that's a word we need to hear too. As we think about rebuilding after this pandemic, as we begin to reintegrate ourselves into business and life together, I want us to remember that we don't always know what's going on in that other person, and that we need to be generous and thoughtful and take the time to care. Take the time to care in every way we can, with words of encouragement, with a smile, with helping hands, with an extra tip the next time you eat out, with words of support for people that you know are going through tough times. Jesus would say, do not judge. Don't be censorious. Don't be critical. Instead, look at your own life. Make the corrections that God would have you make. And then you can help others make the corrections that they need in their lives too. This is an important time for us. We are going to be rebuilding and re-establishing the kinds of relationships and interactions that we should have. And if we aren't careful, we will step on one another instead of lifting one another up. Let's make sure that we're paying attention to Jesus' words. Let me read them for you one more time. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you'll be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. We've got lots of help that we need to give to one another. It's a time for us to encourage one another and lift one another up. And it begins when we say, Lord, I need you. Lord, I need you to change the things inside of me that should not be there. God, would you help me? Would you forgive me? Would you give me that kind of heart? And then, Lord, I need you to help me to love others even when they don't do what I want them to do or what I think they should do. God, I need to be that kind of lover because that's the kind of lover you are. Lord, I need you. Lord, we need you. We're going to close our service this morning with a song, Lord, I Need You. It has pictures of people in life situations that we can identify with because the Lord knows where we live, and He will join us in this life if we will ask Him, because, Lord, we really do need you.